And so before we invite our next speaker today, आपको शायद पता होगा कि 1970 के दशक में महर्षि महेश योगी he revolutionized the whole world with the introduction of the meditation called as Transcendental Meditation. So our next speaker, Swami Ashutosh ji Urs Strobel ji, he is a former disciple of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi ji, but to know more about him, I'll request technical team to play a short film on the life and journey of Ashutosh ji.
Swami Ashutosh Urs Strobel is born in 1954 in Basel, Switzerland. He received diploma in analytical chemistry in 1973 in Basel, but his deep focus was yoga and Indian philosophy. At the age of 10, yoga practice has become a fixed part of his daily routine. After several years, in 1970, Transcendental Meditation was discovered. He left everything and went to Maharishi in December 1973. Under Maharishi's guidance, he received training in many fields, did research in EEG, worked on different research projects at Maharishi European Research University, and became a teacher of Transcendental Meditation and started teaching many courses to thousands of people. He came to India for the first time in November 1980 to participate in the Vedic science course held by Maharishi in the Indian Express building at New Delhi. In October 1981, he became a founding member of Maharishi's Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. Then he did research and training under Rajvede, Vasudev Mulch and Dvivedi in Rasa Shastra for several years. After that, he did and practiced long meditations and studies in Veda and Upanishads, etc. for several years at the Maharishi Vedic University in Holland. Since 1996 January, he has lived in India full-time, and since 2011, he became citizen of India. Currently, he is running a Vedic Ashram in Kausani, Uttaranchal, with the goal to create a Vedic atmosphere in the home of the Veda, the Himalaya. Presently, 40 students are studying Veda in the Endowment Ashram. We warmly welcome Swami Ashutosh Urs Strobel.
Thank you so much. So please help me welcome spiritual guru Swami Ashutosh ji, founder Endowment Vedic Ashram, Uttarakhand.
I have given the computer to Amit.
Acha, you have given computer?
Yes, Amit.
I'll arrange.
Jai Gurudev. Thank you for this heartening introduction. I must confess that today I felt like coming home. It was for me again the first time that I felt like being with Maharishi in a big assembly, like we used to have in the 70s and in the 80s when I lived with Maharishi together for 30 years. Ever so often we had these beautiful celebrations and gatherings and conferences. And after being now alone with my 40, 50 students, coming back here felt like coming back to the family of Maharishi, where we had this same feeling I had today, lighting the light together with our founding Professor Kare. So that was really very impressive. Now, as I was introduced,
Password, there is a password.
Now, when I was asked to come here, and I heard the name is a university with the name of World Peace, I had no idea that it actually so much establishment is going on such a grand scale. I was very impressed the whole morning. I have seen all the activities going on here, and I'm still trying to digest it. So, really, really very impressive. Now, yes, Mahashiji has always taught his meditation with four selling points, out of which three are very easy to understand, which is mental potential and health and social behavior. But then there was a fourth point which was always very difficult to integrate, and how does a person start to meditate because he would be a contributor to world peace. That is very abstract and difficult to comprehend, and I have not understood it for many years. The first time Mahashiji has shocked us it shocked me at least, when in 1979, you always must remember when USSR has attacked Afghanistan, Mahashiji called us all to the hall and said, we have done a big mistake. We have forgotten to do the puja to Kartikeya. I said, what has an invasion of a USSR army to do with the puja of Kartikeya? This was slightly far above my head, but 1 year later I understood it. Mahashiji gave a lecture in the Indian Express building where he explained this whole connection. But before I'm revealing that secret which lightened my mind up, I want to show you a little bit the research on which basis this whole principle is, that by having prayers like we have here, or by having meditation, or by having yogic flying, or by having all this spiritual, religious activity actually can bring world peace. And it has taken me many years to understand, and usually this presentation is 2 hours long, but I think in a country of Shree Tukaram, who has blended in his life the Adidevic with the Adhyatmic, with the Adibhautic, so in such a demonstrative way like no saint I know other than him. I think you will all understand it in 15 minutes. So, you have seen that picture before of the holy tradition, and there is Vashishta. Teaching of Vashishta is one source of that knowledge. He teaches to Lord Rama how to rule a kingdom so that there are no problems. Next slide. So in that, next slide, back. Yeah, okay, field of, he explains to Lord Rama, one slide back. He explains to Lord Rama that you have 5% of the population of your nation doing meditation. That will be enough to keep the nation free of problems, and everything will be healthy and no attacks and no crime, etc. Then he explains, and you can see there, the effect will not by verbal communication, but through primarily a physical effect on the body mediated directly by consciousness. Now this word consciousness, we have in English only one word. Like in Hindi you have only one word for snow, by the Eskimos they have 20. Now the same way in the Vedic tradition there are many words. In the Yoga Vasishtha there are 33 words for consciousness. They have all different shades, which show that the people who experience finer levels of consciousness, they have different degrees. Now the consciousness which is referring here must be what is described in the Mimamsa Sutras, the Kriya Shakti level of consciousness. Now the regular, and he also explains to Sri Ram, it's very important that the people are regularly. Otherwise, if they are not regularly, it will fall back and you will have problems. Next slide. Next slide. Now, he says that a group of siddhas who practice the meditation sutta will be enough to do for the peace of the nation. Next slide. Now, you see, meditation has one effect, but he explained that if you have siddhas, because the 5% inside the population you cannot control, you don't know whether they are doing it or not. But if you have a small group of siddhas who do also siddhis and yogic flying in your palace under one roof, that will be as effective as 5%. Unfortunately, Vasishtha is not saying exactly how much you need, but he says that it's much more effective, especially because it's in a group. It will have an effect of squared. Now, I found in one other text in the Shiva Samhita, where it says if the yogi lifts up and has the yogic flying effect, then he will purify the whole world, destroys the darkness in the world. Next slide. Now that is square root. This is the square root. That means the n square effect is what Vasishtha refers to. And we know from science that a small unit of orderliness is much more powerful than a huge amount of chaos. Next slide. So that is the principle of this, and by that we can govern a nation in peace, happiness, prosperity, and in integrity, free of attacks, if we have enough people producing that effect. Next slide. We call this thing the Maharishi effect in honor of Maharishi, who emphasized it to the world, and is compared to the Meissner effect, where we have a complete state of orderliness in an electric current, where no penetrating field can go in. Same thing is with the kavach, you can say. Next slide. Purity basically is triumphing. Next slide. Now here we have our yogic flyers, so now let's see what effect they have. I showed you now the Praman on the level of our Vedic texts. Now I'm showing you 3-4 of these modern science, because that is another proof which we have seen. Next slide. This was one of the first researches on yogi flying we did in 1978, where we sent in each nation, we had a group of people going to a certain district of a nation, like Rhode Island in the United States, and in other countries. In India we have taken New Delhi, in Germany we have taken Bavaria, in Switzerland, Uri, etc. So all the teachers who learned the yogic flying technique went there, and for several months were doing just that in that place, plus teaching meditation to as many people as possible, to see for the coming 3-4 years if the effect can be maintained. And we have taken a statistic of events in these, from the government, statistic on different, next slide, we can see there. And if you look, if you look through it, then you will see that there are always superlatives. The largest decreased, the first time it decreased, the best, and you see it, suicide dropped, and divorce dropped, marriages increased, and traffic accidents, fatalities less, murder fell, all these different 12 parameters I think they have taken, were dramatic turnaround. Next slide. This research had a p-value of 1 in a million chance that it was a coincidence. It was combined with 3 more nations, New Delhi, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, and that was then published in the Journal of Mind and Behavior. Next slide. Now, this, in the same year, we tested in 5 places in the world, one in Puerto Rico. President Santosh invited us, and I mind you, whenever Maharishi has done these things, we informed the government or went by invitation. It's not that we came to the back door and tried out and see whether it works. No, we came to the front door and said, it will work, watch it out, test your statistics, observe what is happening in the nation. So we sent 160 people to Nicaragua and 140 to neighboring countries. And it was a dramatic turnaround. From the moment the people arrived there, the whole chaos which was in the country and thousands of people who have been dying stopped. President Santosh announced election, and the prisoners got released and all that. And the moment the people left, the whole thing collapsed again. Now, if you see in the African nations, Zambia and Zimbabwe, there we had also 16 people died average daily. The moment our people came, there were 56 people coming to Zambia. It stopped, it fell down to 3 people a day in the average. And when they left again, it went back to 16. It was just mind-blowing. And in the neighboring state of Zambia, in Lusaka, when our people arrived, 40 of them, the bombing of the city stopped. And then the government asked us to stay back so they can have peaceful elections, so we did. And after they left, again, it exploded. Same as in Iran. In Iran, Maharishi sent 200 people, and everything became quiet, and it was a very critical situation. It was the transition from the Shah to Khomeini. And then the Shah, the government did not extend the visas of our people. And Maharishi, I was sitting with him, and he said, I feel cornered. I have the solution, but we cannot continue. And he was a little bit upset, and he instructed the people to leave immediately together in one charter flight. The plane has taken off, not even 1 hour, and the hotel burned down, and it was a complete chaos in the country. In the group next in Lebanon, there were, keep that slide. In Lebanon, there were 400 people in Israel, and in Syria about 120 people, and in Cyprus also, and that has put Lebanon for the entire duration of 3 months at peace. Lebanon had a very drastic civil war going on during those days. The moment these courses were over, the people left again. It was the biggest onslaught again in Beirut. And the group over there in Thailand, because there was a war building up between Cambodia and Vietnam, backed by USSR and USA, respectively, and that was very dangerous, and it was about to spoil over to Thailand. 260 people went to Thailand and just did yogic flying there, and the whole thing stopped. Next slide. Now we can see this. Next slide. We can see in the statistics here, this was done by the Conflict and Peace Data Bank. When our people were there, this was the improvement according to that database. Next slide. And if you see it over 10 years, whenever we had conferences with big groups, which you just see in the next slide, we had this change. Now Maharishi was convinced that we need a big group because he knew that the problem of all problems is always coming from the United States. So he needed a big group there to make US pure, and the square root out of 1% of the US population with 1,600 people. Next slide. So we have also a nice golden dome, not as high as here, but so there were 2 domes, one for the lady and one for the man, and they every day did the meditation together, and it had a huge, next slide, it had a huge effect on the life quality of the United States. Next slide. That is one of my favorite researchers, not because I'm a chemist by profession, but the thing is that what we did is we tested the level of happiness in the public of the city of Fairfield of people which are not practicing meditation. They are just under the influence of that effect. You see, the effect is interestingly in the Yoga Sutras. There is a sutra which says, Ahimsa pratishtanyam tatsanidau vairatyageha. So tatsanidau means in the vicinity. Now ahimsa pratishtanyam does not mean not killing mosquitoes. It's not on that level. Ahimsa pratishtanyam is on that level where we are completely in tune with all the laws of nature and not violating any laws of nature on that most refined level of consciousness. That means ahimsa pratishtanyam. Being established at that level, all crime in the vicinity, Tatsanidao means in the vicinity. Now this is the strange thing, but we will understand shortly why it is like that. So that is that what we have seen. Now these people, we asked their urine sample to test in the serotonin level by measuring the 5-hydroxyethyl amino acid, but we saw that during the time the group was less in the vacation time when the students went home, where there were less than 1,600 people, the serotonin level dropped by 400%. So it is just amazing. They had no idea why we measured them on top of it. Next slide. Now this is the research which blew everybody's mind. What we wanted to see is what is the effect on Lebanon if 200 people come and meditate and do yogic flying together in a hotel in Jerusalem West. Now, unfortunately for Lebanon, but fortunately for scientific research, there were no 200 people coming for these 2 months, October and September, and we had a fluctuation from 82 to 234, and as you can see, the life quality fluctuated with the amount of people. When our people were many, the life quality was nice. When our people went down, the life quality went down. Next slide. And we see, next slide. And we see the intensity scale of the war was exactly opposite. Whenever our people were many, that is the dotted line, then the war intensity was down, and when our people were less, then the war intensity was up. Now we thought we have to show this to the world. What is the use of scientific research without showing it to the world? So we went to the Yale University. There's a journal for conflict resolution, to Dr. Rosset, and when he saw this, he looked at our scientists and asked, "Are you out of your mind?" Because he could not understand, and that was a problem which many people have, how in the world is this working? Where is the connection? What is actually happening? If we turn off on the light, we know there's somewhere a switch. Who does that? It's not any magic. Now, we know because there's a cable between the switch and the light. But where is the cable? What is the connection between a group doing something in a hotel, God knows what, with the reduction of war intensity or the improvement of the quality of life? Now, Dr. Rosset was not ready to publish it without further examination, and he asked his advisors what to do. 3 didn't even want to get bothered about it, but one said, teach them a lesson. They should go and make a research and correlate it with weather conditions or festivals and stuff like this. And we said, okay, but send one person from your team to do that with us. There was no correlation found. The only thing which was correlated was the activity of the yogic flyers in a hotel which was about 150 kilometers away from Beirut. Next slide. Next slide. Now, next slide that we have already covered. He was then, Dr. Rosset eventually published it, but he made a remark saying that he was very astonished about it, and he kind of an editorial. Next slide. Now, we all knew in the 70s and in the 60s and 70s the problem of China, so Maharishi decided to make an air conditioning effect on China, and he had groups all around China in all the different countries like Nepal, in Laos, in Thailand, in Hong Kong, in Japan, in Korea. Next slide. And we know what eventually happened in China, the communist system. Next slide. Oh, this is a picture. Maharishi himself went in 1974 teaching 27,000 Nepalese. Next slide. So then Maharishi decided we have to have an effect, a global effect, because he was very much concerned about the Cold War and the possibility of Third World War, which he stopped single-handedly several times with all these groups. And that was one occasion which we found out later that during that time there was actually a plan of the USSR to attack, because they had a misunderstanding from the aggressive speeches President Reagan gave. That was in the early 80s when President Reagan just was the President of the United States. These were 7,000 people assembled there in Fairfield. Next slide. And that's what we see, what happened during those days. We see again the p-values are amazing. It is amazingly significant. Next slide. And the effect of 7 assemblies we can see is huge. All these people in different groups in different months. Next slide. 5 minutes. There you see huge effect during those times, whenever this assemblies was in the world. Next slide. Now you see the p-value is 19 zeros. This is not heard of in sociological or psychological researches. Next slide. This was a group in Washington where we said to the police chief, you will see the crime rate goes down. He laughed and went to the TV and said, we need 2 feet of snow that the crime rate in Washington goes down. And it was a July course. Well, next slide. You see what happened. Our people came, crime rate went down as we predicted. We predicted 20%. It went down 23.3%. Next slide. So Maharishi was now really concerned to break the Berlin Wall. And he started to collect thousands of Vedic Pandits and made them in yogic flyers. There's a picture here of Maharishi Nagar in Noida. And we made huge yagyas, which was financed by the German movement. And he said in 1987, he said to Dr. Röder, from now on, you can count the days until the Berlin Wall falls. In 1987, that was 2 years before it happened. Next slide. That was always Maharishi's thing, yagyas and yogic flying in big groups, that will have the effect for the world. Next slide. And that brought then in 1919 the end of the Cold War and the fall of the wall. Next slide. Now that was a project we did with a whole nation in Africa, what is it? Mozambique. Next slide, and we see Mozambique was a complete turnaround. From 13 years of civil war, the president finally decided to initiate 16,000 soldiers into TM, and New York Times, 3 months after that event, headline, Mozambique, an African success story. It completely turned around. Here comes the president to Holland to thank Maharishi for this whole thing. And up to today, now he's not president anymore, but he is still speaking and promoting. Next slide. Same thing in Cambodia. Next slide. Ecuador. Next slide. In the Colombia, President Santosh, when he got the Nobel Prize for Peace in 2016, he said it's all because of the activities of TM in his country, due to this Christian priest, Father Meja, who initiates all the street children which are in drugs and street crime. He collects them and teaches them, and that has completely transformed the country. Next slide. Now I just want to explain you how it actually works. That is now the secret. In 1980, on the stage, there was Dr. B.D. Triguna, who was the most famous Vaidya at that time of the country, and he explained to us, and there was Maharishi on the stage also, he said, when we eat food, then we transform it into the 7 dhatus, Rasa, Rakta, Mamsa, Meda, Asti, Macha, Shukra. Finer than Shukra is Ojas, and finer than Ojas is Soma. Now, then Dr. Keith Wallace, he asked, but how can we measure it? Is this something seen? And then Maharishi started to speak. And that cleared everything. And that's what I said at the beginning, in a country where Saint Tukaram was so prevalent, who has demonstrated the fusion of the Adidevic with the Adibhautic. All these things we cannot understand without introducing the Adidevic. That means Maharishi explained the somras which we produce in our meditation, that flows to the devas and they get strengthened. He said the reason why the world is in such a chaos is because there is not enough production of soma. What Maharishi basically did his whole life, he was like a CEO running from one unit of soma factory around the world, where he had a few hundred people here and a few thousand people there, to make sure they produce enough soma so that devata level is strengthened. And that's how world peace is getting established. Next slide. Next slide. This is what I found in the 9th mandala of the Rig Veda. Very beautifully explained directly. It says, Soma, Lord of four regions, sprinkle of benefits, flow from Archika, effused by a truth-speaking, truthful man with faith and devotion, flow into for Indra. Satyena Shradhaya Tapasya. This is the state one has to be inward. By that we fuse the Soma and the Devas get strengthened, and that will eventually transform the world. Thank you. Jai Gurudev.
Thank you so much. A huge round of applause, friends. Thank you so much. A standing ovation and a huge round of applause.
Friends, just a thought came to my mind when I saw his name as Swami Ashutosh Urs Strobel ji, but today an Indian citizen, addressing on yoga, meditation and the fire of knowledge divine. Can you let him come here? Can you come on this side? I just reminded of the Udupi Swamiji, Jnana Brahma Rushi aisi padvi hai. I felt that how passionate he is. From the bottom of heart, he has been speaking each and every word, trying to make the Indian people mostly to understand which country they belong to, what essence and philosophy their world religion has, what is the meaning of Vedas and Upanishads, and speaking to the end of the consciousness and reality. When this institution is trying to work on MIT School of Consciousness and Reality to make ourselves understand what is the essence and philosophy of all world religions. So I'm grateful to you. Once again, give me a big applause. I'm grateful. Let's join hands. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Square root of the 1% population of India 3000 से 3500 होता है. तो रिवेरेड कराड़ सर, अगर 3 से 3500 बच्चे हमारे यहाँ पे रोज़ अगर 30 से 40 मिनट का ध्यान करेंगे तो उसमें इतनी क्षमता है कि वी कैन ट्रांसफॉर्म द कॉन्शियसनेस ऑफ द होल इंडिया, अगर ये महर्षि इफेक्ट का अगर हम ये फॉर्मूला इस्तेमाल करते हैं. सो दैट इज़ अ पॉसिबिलिटी एंड इमेंसली कंट्रीब्यूशन टू द विश्व गुरु एज द ड्रीम ऑफ रिवेरेड प्रोफेसर कराड़ सर.